We have heard so many phenomenal stories today from entrepreneurs, academics, innovators, change makers. It's like the impact and the change and the fun just never seem to stop. I think that one of the things that we're really hoping to convey throughout the conference is that entrepreneurialism and impact can come in so many different shapes and sizes, whether it's something that you're doing to impact your local community, something that you're looking to do on a national scale, or something that you're looking to do on a global scale. But one of the things that can be really challenging, and I think that a number of our panelists have touched on this, is how do you stay true to your values when you are kind of being pulled into the market? So whether you need to answer to stakeholders or customers or family or community, it can be a bit of a tricky tightrope walk, if you will, to kind of hold true to those values while you're really pursuing that impact. And so that's kind of the tenet of the session that we're going to be getting into today. So we have leaders that are joining us from different backgrounds and different perspectives and different disciplines. And we do have one panelist that hopefully will be running in a little bit late today, so there must be something in the water. But I'm going to turn the mic over to our moderator in just a moment here. But we have on stage joining us Kai Sargent, who is a DEI consultant working with the Sauder School of Business at UBC, amongst other places. We have co-founder and CEO of one of our Hatch alumni ventures, Pocketed. We have Andrea Lloyd, who is our Associate Director of Engagement and Entrepreneurship at UBC, who's going to be moderating, and hopefully Patrice will join us, but if not, I know we're going to have a phenomenal conversation. So, Andrea, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. And now, is my mic working? And the answer is yes, perfect. One of the things that we all agreed on prior to prep for this is that we're all expert talkers. So we have plenty to say until Patrice arrives, and we look forward to her potentially joining us in a bit. So, first of all, I wanted to welcome you both. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us this afternoon. Looking forward to digging into the question of values and leading with your values. But one of the things I think is we're super honored, and just in terms of where we are positioned in the day, that we are going to lead you to the closing remarks and to our social networking time with energy and inspiration. So stay tuned for that. So I was doing a little preparation around values. I'm like, values, do I know what values mean? Do we all know? We kind of have a general sense or whatever. So I looked it up in the, dictionary.com or whatever. Actually, this was from a website called Ethics Unwrapped. And it defines values as individual beliefs that motivate people to act one way or another. They serve as a guide for human behavior. So I guess with that, grounding in the definition sense of it, my question for you would be, what does that mean to you when we talk about leading with your values?
Yeah, sure. For me, leading with my values really comes down to thinking about the work that I'm doing, especially getting into consulting. And a lot of my work I never planned to get into the work that I was doing. It was more having the values of compassion, right? Really wanting to see things be better for the people around me, really wanting to take action. That's another one of my values, is really being action-oriented, not to just sit back and think about all the things that we can do, but actually start taking those steps. And that's how it sort of ended up, where I just started to take action, started to do things and build things for the people that I knew would make my community at the Sauder School of Business better. And then over time, it just grew and grew and grew and grew, and all the way until people are now asking me to help in their organizations. And all these things that I could not have imagined 3 years ago when I kind of got started, for me, that's what it was to lead with my values.
Great, thanks. And we can dig into some of the details of that in a moment. Perfect. What about you, Brianna?
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Brianna. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pocketed. For those of you who have not heard of us, we help companies across Canada and the US access free money from the government. So if you have not yet, I highly encourage you to make an account. Use the code EUBCX so that you can actually get access to the platform, because it's now locked behind a paywall, but that'll get you in for free. So leading with your values, for me, is something that's evolved quite a lot over the last 7 years. I've been an entrepreneur. Pocketed is my third company. Same for my co-founder, Arya. And what we look at is, what are the common threads that drive us, that motivate us in building businesses, in doing the work that we do? And one of the most common threads for both of us is creating impact. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's always been about, how do we make impact through the work that we do? How do we leave people, places, things better than we found them. And for us at Pocketed, it's a huge purpose behind doing what we do. So we know that building a business is freaking hard. You're all here because building a company is really hard. You will have days that feel amazing and you're on top of the world and everything is going right and you can do no wrong. But then you're also going to have times where you feel like you are just dredging along the bottom of the ocean, and we have all had those moments. And I'd say we've been through lots of those in the last 6 months of our own building journey, which happy to unpack. But for us, what keeps us motivated through all of those moments in time is why we do what we do. And for us, the purpose is eliminating barriers for entrepreneurs, specifically financial barriers to start. Because again, money is such a stressor for me. I know personally, I see people nodding, so I'm sure many of you can relate as well. It's the thing that keeps me up at night. But when I know that we're able to help eliminate financial barriers for other entrepreneurs, that is motivating. That impact is incredibly motivating. And in doing that, we then enable and empower other entrepreneurs to go ahead and create even more impact beyond the scope of what Pocketed does. And that for us, that amplification factor is hugely motivating, but for us, it's deeply rooted in impact.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And I think maybe let's dig in a little bit more to your work, Kai, because I think the common sort of, denominator here is both of you are working to reduce or eliminate structural or systemic barriers. And I think that is a major sort of animating force, that sense of taking action for something. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. And then I have a follow-on question about where you both find your source of strength or courage to address these barriers and challenges, because we know that sometimes when you push against something, there's pushback, and it takes some courage to be able to maintain your motivation in the face of that adversity, really. So that's a big question. So over to you, Kai.
I'll just do the quick intro as
Yeah.
well. My name is Kai Sargent. I use the pronouns she, her, or they, them. And for me, getting into my work, I do a lot of DEI consulting. One around gender diversity, so creating inclusion for non-binary, gender diverse people in organizations. But my work kind of expanded beyond that, and also just tackling the structural barriers that exist for people of color, queer folk in organizations, and all the different ways that there's really a lot of hidden challenges that go into that. And where the work really started was in the hi, Patrice. You made it. No, absolutely not at all. Where that work came out was really from my own experience at the business school, realizing that things were not set up for me. And if they're not set up for me, they're probably not set up well for a lot of other people. And just running into those barriers myself, thinking, someone's got to do something about this. And waiting, am I that person? I guess I am. I guess I'm going to be that person to just do the things that everyone's kind of asking someone to do. And so that was really the process of how I got into that. And when you talk about passion, I think passion is a really interesting concept, right? When people think about, I'm so passionate about this, as if you can just sort of choose what you're passionate about. I think passion really comes in this intersection of what can you actually do? What do you have, experience in? What are you interested in? And then how does that intersect with the path of your life, right? Where do you see yourself sitting in, the general history of where we are? And when you reflect on that, I think that's where passion comes from, right? And so that's really how I saw myself and where my passions come from.
And that, back to that source of strength, if you can locate yourself on that sort of little nexus, then there you go. You can dig into that, right? And that moves you forward. Yeah, I love the way you explain that. Welcome, Patrice. Here is a microphone. Now, before we actually turn it on, or you have it, are you ready to say hello, or do you need to catch your breath? No, Thank you so much for joining us. And we are just getting underway. So you've arrived at exactly the right time.
Excellent. Okay, my apologies to everyone and to you guys. Thank you. I don't think my mic's working. I broke it or something. I'm introducing myself?
Yes. So welcome, Patrice. And the question was, we've explored a couple of different things, but tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure.
What brought you here? And then if you have time, talk about maybe what leading with your values means to you. So
Those
big
are
questions.
huge questions.
Exactly. Yeah.
First off, my name is Patrice Mousseau. My company is called Satya Organics. Started in my kitchen crock pot, grew to, we're now in 3 countries and hundreds of stores. I created it from a need, as most parents do for my child. I'm Anishinaabe. I come from Fort William First Nation in Ontario. I'm a first-time entrepreneur. I've never done this before. My background's actually in broadcast journalism, radio and television. Apparently, I'm frequently late as well. Yeah, I started my business, as I mentioned, because it was a need for my daughter. I didn't want her to have to use the topical steroids that the doctor had recommended. So given that I have some research skills, I started looking into not only the existing medical research, but academic studies from great people like you, stuff that's come up in the last 10, 15 years, as well as, of course, traditional medicine. And bought said crock pot used off of Facebook for $15 and cleared my daughter's eczema up in 2 days. So then I had a whole crock pot left over, and at the time I didn't realize that it was 20% of the world's population that suffered from skin issues like this. And so I just kind of put the call out, does anybody need any of this, just to get rid of what was left in the crock pot. So then I had to make 3 more crock pots, and then, ended up doing a farmer's market in Port Moody, and then a local store, and then Whole Foods called, and I was like, I'm still making my crock pot, you gotta let me scale up. And so I did, and now we're in all across Canada. We just launched in the US, and we've been exporting to Hong Kong as well. So that's sort of who we are. As I mentioned also, I've never run a business before. And so I didn't want to be ever questioned on what I was doing, because to me, the perceptions of business have always been very negative, right? It's all about profit and extraction and taking advantage of others and, just trying to accumulate wealth. And for me, it was really about showing my daughter and myself that I could do this without having to give up any of my values, and in fact, create a new way of doing business. And I didn't really even think that was possible until I met a bunch of other amazing entrepreneurs, particularly women. Started at SVI Women here in Vancouver, and then CEO, now called Coralus, nationally, internationally, and was able to start building community and recognizing that other people felt the same way that I did. So it doesn't have to be that culture of, that toxic negative culture of building a business. What it can really be is about a way to express your desire for social change and the way that the world works. So briefly, that's me.
Thank you for sharing, Patrice. And we were just joking as we started that we all feel we're like expert talkers. So, so thank you for that. In terms of what you just heard from Patrice in the sense of like her source of strength and that notion of connecting with the community, I just wanted to explore with you, Brianna, or Kai, you, about how that resonates with you. Is there alignment in that kind of common?
Yeah, I think community plays a really important role in entrepreneurship, or at least it has for us. And that community can look like many things. It looks like being here. So all of you are engaging in and building community simply by being here. And I'll say entrepreneurship at UBC does a beautiful job of that. We were fortunate to go through entrepreneurship at UBC programs for this company and my one before, and it's actually how I met my co-founder. So absolutely, community is a massive part of building, because you simply can't and don't know everything. None of us do. And one of our values as a company is to be the dumbest people in the room by design. And having community really allows you to do that. You surround yourself with people that know more or know differently than you know. And that for us has been so critical in being able to pivot through hard moments, being able to accelerate when there are huge opportunities. And all of that for us is a result of community, hard work, responsiveness, opportunity, all of that. But community at the core of it plays a massive role. And I am forever grateful to entrepreneurship at UBC for the role they've played in that for us.
Yeah, because I think a community is about sharing and building together, right? And so you had mentioned, Patrice, in your introduction that you didn't want to compromise on certain things. So what does that mean when there's inevitably trade-offs? Like we're working against systems, there's powerful forces at work that may not always be working in our favor or the people we want to serve. So I'm just wondering, around the trade-offs, like how have you navigated amongst those? This is a question for all three of you after Patrice.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I don't know how much of a trade-off there really is, to be honest. I've had people make demands on me about the way that business has always been done, and when I say no, they're shocked. But there are always people who are going to say, oh, okay, you want to do it this way? I understand. We want to be partners. And those are the kind of people that you want to be in business with anyway. You don't want to just be saying yes to somebody because they have a pocket full of money. especially if you're talking about giving up equity in your company, the most expensive capital you will ever spend. So make sure the relationships you're getting involved in are ones that are really values aligned and they really get you and you really understand them as well. Because it's easier to get divorced than it is to get rid of somebody on your cap table. So be aware of the relationships you're building and say no.
Saying no is hard to do, isn't it? So it's like a muscle we have to practice. How about you, Kai? What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, can you just repeat the?
Just in the sense of because I think Patrice mentioned something interesting. We often think of it that there's a trade-off, but you're kind of reframing it. Maybe there isn't. Maybe I just are going to build a community around the people where that's not an issue, right? Around finding the values alignment with that wider group, or changing the way other people may approach things.
Yeah. So in DEI work, I think a lot of historically people have thought about it as this trade-off, right? This is a conversation that I have a lot when I talk to people about DEI. Okay, we want to hire a diverse workforce, but they're scared because they're thinking like, am I trading off like a better qualified candidate because I'm hiring for diversity, right? As if this is a trade-off that actually exists. And the thing I have to try to explain to people is kind of what you were saying about, we need people who think differently than us, right? An amazing, like one of the fun study that I like to cite is that people were asked in North America, if you didn't have ketchup and mustard, what would you put on your hot dog? And so the most common response that was given was mayonnaise. The same question was asked to people in Europe and people in Latin America. If you didn't have ketchup and mustard, what would you put on your hot dog? And the answer was spices, onions, pickles. And like these are all of the things, that is what the value of diversity brings, right? And so when you're thinking about this conversation of trade-offs, right? What am I trading off to get the value of different perspective? What am I trading off? Like maybe I'm trading efficiency, but how much more different are we going to be able to do things? And that's kind of where the innovation comes from. It's that attitude of, are we just going to split the pie slightly larger for ourselves? Or are we actually going to try to grow it in a new way, right? To capture new things that we haven't done before, right? And so I also agree with that. The conversation of trade-off is a very limiting, way to see things.
And actually, I love what you were saying earlier about the systems that were not set up for us. The reality is most people in the world are not white, cisgendered males. We're all different kinds of people, so we can have all that different opportunity and not just limit ourselves to the very narrow way of thinking that's always been holding us back in the past.
I would look at trade-off a little bit differently. I think you've done a beautiful job, both of you, of articulating trade-off from a business standpoint. But when I think about trade-off, there's a trade-off for sure in most things that we do, or not necessarily a trade-off, but an intentional decision that you make. And for me, what that looks like is around how do I balance or not work with anything else, business with anything else. So I'll tackle trade-off from that perspective, because I think that innately feeds into values. And Aria, my co-founder, and I are often asked, how do you balance doing businesses and running multiple businesses and having kids? And our answer is we fucking don't. We don't balance it at all. It's literally hard all the time. We are overwhelmed all the time. It is hard. And you will have days like Friday where, I don't have childcare unexpectedly and I'm holding my 11-month-old son while I'm trying to take work calls as he's screaming because my sister's dog came near him. So you will always have moments where you need to make a choice. And sure, you can call those trade-offs, but I also just call them choices. And I think that as people, one of the most powerful things we can have is choice. To have choice is a massive privilege. That is not something people all over the world have. But here, we have choice. And I believe that as an entrepreneur, that is an innate privilege to be an entrepreneur. People that are worried about paying rent don't necessarily have the luxury or the privilege of thinking about how do I innovate something completely new. So I absolutely believe that for me to be an entrepreneur is a privilege, and that privilege has responsibility. Because I'm also responsible for 20 plus people being able to pay rent every single 2 weeks, every month. And that is another responsibility. So it can mean trade-offs on your time. It means that I worked 18-hour days while I was 8 months pregnant, literally, because that was what I had to do to make sure our people could be paid their payroll every 2 weeks. So there are sometimes trade-offs when it comes to life, and that's not true for everybody. But I want to normalize that is and can be true in case that is true for you right now, because that has certainly been my truth.
And really for the diversity hire, I mean, you also look at who's your customer base, right? You need to have those people sitting around the decision-making table and lending their voices to strengthen your business. This is good business. This is not just a nice to have. This is something you have to succeed. Excuse me, I'm still out of breath.
Yeah.
I would agree. I think it's a question of can you afford not to have diversity?
Yep.
And the answer is probably no.
This is a theme that's come up throughout the day in all of the panels, so it's great that we're reinforcing that very important point here. About this, you being a first-time entrepreneur and mentioning this is what I did and just like rolled up from there. And Kai, your story's similar. Brianna, this isn't your first rodeo, so to speak. I hope that's not you can remember your first rodeo. But so part of this is like you are, powerful people animating, a different future for yourselves, but you're also communicating that to people that you're building your team with, right? Your community with. So my question is, how do you define your values? Like for some of us, I'm kind of like, what would my values be if I had to, someone asked me right now, what are your top 3 values? If that's a question that people ask each other, but how do you articulate, communicate that? How do you share that with others? And is that a weird question or does this make sense in terms of asking? Yeah. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Around communicating that and standing by them?
Yeah, so to answer, I think what you're asking is what are our values, and I'll answer that.
How do you
question.
identify them?
Yeah, how do you identify them?
Yeah.
And I think my big lesson is that when you're building a company, the values of your company can't just be yours. They have to be more than just your values, because as a company, you are not, or at least I hope you're not, the whole company. Sometimes you are for a period of time, but a company is so much bigger than you as one founder. So when you define values, it can't just make sense for you. It can't just resonate for you. It needs to be representative of your team. And that needs to be a shared understanding and that shared North Star. So at the end of the day, at the beginning, certainly you are going to define values, and that is your responsibility to communicate your values as you're hiring. You want to find folks that are equally committed to the vision and the mission and are going to be supportive in that journey. But you probably need to revisit your values as you continue to grow and scale. Because the more people you have on your team, it may make sense for you to ensure that are these values still authentic to us as a company? Are they still everyone's shared values? And I think that exercise needs to happen at different inflection points along your growth. We just went through it for my first company, and we're 6 years in, but we just went through it for the first time going through a revamp on values, and it needed to happen. They were at the core correct, but they needed to be reimagined based on the fact that our team is quadrupled in size, and it needs to be representative of everybody, not just me.
In an inclusive way, in part of the conversation, and it's part of the work that we all do, right? So, okay. What about your thoughts, Kai?
Yeah. So I'm still in that stage where the company is me, right? But I'm also a student, so I'm balancing a lot of other things going on. But I'm really excited to graduate next year so I can finally kind of get off into the real world. But what you were saying about values, I actually, one of the things, probably a result of my entrepreneurship education, is I do a values exercise every year. Usually when the cherry blossoms I pick a day, I put my phone at home, and I go sit under a tree with a book and a pen and just sit there for like 12 hours and see what happens. And through all of that, I come out with things like values, things like what do I want for myself this year? What are the visions that I'm having? And this year, so I'll give you the 3 kind of values I had. One of is two that I had from before: compassion and action, which I kind of mentioned. Compassion in that understanding that everyone has a different story, right? And being compassionate is not about assuming that, what people are going through, that you have the ability to understand that. It's listening to what they need, right? And being able to provide that for them. Right? The second one is action, right? Making sure that when you're listening, you're acting on that. Right? We spend so much time thinking about what's the best thing to do, or listening to other people talk about it. We talk and we talk and we talk, especially in kind of the social media environment. There's a lot of people talking. And especially when I got started in doing this work, that was the thing that differentiated me. Was I wasn't just talking. I was creating communities. I was creating resources. I was building different platforms. One of the recent things that just got added to my list this year was joy. And that wasn't on there before. Before that, it was reliability, which reliability is great. And it's not like I don't put that on there, but joy really had to take center stage, because I was being reliable to so many people that I wasn't really being reliable to myself. I kind of, at one point in my journey, I sort of lost that spark of why am I even doing this? Right? This isn't fun anymore. I'm not enjoying my time. And so that was what came out of it, was I need to put joy back into my life. I need to reconnect to why this work is important to me. How am I going to get enjoyment and feel that passion? Because if I don't feel that passion, I'm not going to want to wake up and do it. right? And so that's kind of how my values have really played out.
Thank you. And Patrice, I'm going to ask you yours, but I'm just thinking that's a really good inspiration for action-oriented folks. We don't have cherry blossoms for a while, but pick a clear, starry night and lie under them and bring a book like Kai. I think that's a wonderful suggestion. What about you, Patrice?
I'm inspired by that as well. I think you're way ahead of me. At one point, me and the gang, we all sat down and we did like a word cloud, like what does the company mean to you kind of thing. But as time went on, we just kind of short formed it, which is don't work with a-holes and don't be an a-hole. Also coming from my background, my culture, we don't work on a hierarchy in my company. We work we flip that hierarchy, that triangle on its side, and we make it a table, and everybody sits together and has an equal voice. We all just have different.
That's a beautiful
different
image.
voices.
I like the idea of flipping the pyramid over to the table. That's
Bring in the voices of the elders and the children. Honestly, my daughter she's 10, but she has the best ideas. So, it's just really about hearing everybody's voice, and we're all in this together. And money is not supposed to be coming in and stopping. Money is supposed to be circulating in and out and moving, and that's where things just tend to grow and cycle. So. Yeah, and that's giving back to the community. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just realized I didn't make the public service announcement earlier about Slido. I know that you've all been here all day, so you probably know the drill, but I think it's time to move to questions from the audience because we want lots of time for a dialogue or a discussion. So I hope some have appeared. So go to slido.com and it's EIW 22.
And in the meantime, could I actually take a moment to ask
course.
the audience a question?
Yes.
So this is kind of perfect that I'm here at an entrepreneurship gathering because I'm actually looking for someone to come and spend some time with my company. I'm a former broadcaster, but I really want to get on TikTok. And if anybody out there has any TikTok expertise and wants to learn from me how to build a company, come see me at the end of this, okay? Because I'd love to talk to you, and we'll get you paid and everything else. But I'm looking to hire.
Nurse here from Pico Products was just talking about her TikTok prowess. So I will make sure.
Please do, because
Amazing.
it's honestly TikTok's an amazing marketing opportunity, but it's also super fun, and I can't wait to get started. But I just knowing me, I need somebody to help me. So that's my ask. Oh, also, if anybody wants to try some product, I did bring some samples with me. So also come see me at the end.
Amazing. Well, fortunately, yes. And fortunately, after this is over, it's not over. There's going to be mingling and fun things that we will allude to a little bit later. So thank you, Patrice, for mentioning that. Awesome. And it's bringing the joy in, as Kai was just talking about. Okay, so we have some questions coming, which is awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to just read from the top, I think originally, but first question is, how do you effectively build your company around your values? Find aligned talent, aligned investors. Have you exited talent, turned down investors because of values? Great question. Anyone's ready to go? It looks like you've got a response.
Yes. So build the company around values. I looked, when I started the company, somebody came to me and they were like, oh, I have a MBA. I'm going to be great. I'm going to come in and help you run the business. You can do all the creative stuff. I'll handle it. She almost sunk the business. And then I was like, okay, well, what kind of person do I really want? So I actually reached out on Facebook to moms, stay-at-home moms and caregivers of elderly parents. And I was like, I'm going to give you an opportunity to work on your own time and on your own hours, and we're going to pay you a living wage. I was like, but I would like you to come and work for me. So many people, there's such an undervalued, huge resource right now, these people who can't work 9 to 5. So you give them that opportunity, and you've got these incredible people who come in and I'm going to swear, sorry, just
No, I think we already did. It's okay. Go ahead.
Get shit done. Because if you only have a limited amount of time, you're not screwing around. You're getting your work done, and you quite often are stepping up into other roles. People I've hired have moved throughout the company. So maybe start thinking of more diverse ways of looking at who you're looking for as well. Aligned investors. Yes, I have turned down quite a few investors for all the reasons that I mentioned before. And exited talent. Yeah, I had a consultant that came in, and she was rude to my EA. She thought she was super awesome and that she should be able to talk to me directly, even though this person was doing her job, managing my schedule. And I just had to say, I'm sorry, but you're done. because that's toxin in your environment. And if your people that you're working with know that you aren't going to stand up for them, you're screwed.
That's a great, really concrete example, and I imagine all of us can think of examples like that where we have a feeling about something that isn't right, and we might not have done something about it. So it's important to kind of think, okay, what might the consequence be? And that would be, destroying the beautiful culture you've created in terms of respect and collaboration, right? So yeah, there's some amazing questions coming up, but I wanted Brianna to answer this question as well.
Yeah, so hiring is really interesting because I very much believe hiring and employment is a two-way street. Somebody has to want to work with you as much as you want to work with them. And I think values are also a two-way street. Your values have to be a fit for them and vice versa, and that's not always the case. So what we do is we are probably too transparent about the good, the bad, and the ugly of working in a startup environment, the realities of being at the stage that we're at, how quickly you kill ideas, move forward with other ones, pivot, try new things, experiment. And we always give candidates who we are interviewing 24 hours after their final interview and say, we want you to come back to us in 24 hours and let us know if you feel like this is a culture that you can thrive in. These values, do they resonate with you? Does the way that we do business make sense for you? Does it seem like someplace that you're ready to be all in? Because when you are at the stage that we are at, that many of you are probably at also in your startup journeys, you need people to be all in because it's hard. And you get it wrong way more often than you get it right. And you need to be willing to move forward egolessly so that when you do kill ideas, you can keep progressing and not get stuck in this vortex of, oh my God, it didn't work and I feel so horrible. You need to be able to move forward with that. So giving people that 24-hour opportunity to very much intentionally opt into your company, for us, has absolutely saved us from making hires that ultimately wouldn't have been set up for success in our environment right now. Because stage fit makes a big difference when you're hiring, as well as value alignment, culture alignment, et cetera. From an investor standpoint, we have declined money from investors in the past. We raised around last year. We've also had great experiences with investors for the most part. So, I think there can be excellent investors out there as well. It's just about finding the ones that are right for you and having lots of conversations, even if they don't ultimately choose to invest, because you will learn from that process. So even if it's not the right timing or the right fit to take their money, you will likely learn something from that process as well. But we certainly declined money when things were thrown at us at the 11th hour. That gut check just felt wrong. And it sucks when you're saying no to six-figure checks, but it had to be done.
What I'm hearing from both of these examples is a little bit of like making sure there's space for reflection. So making sure there's space for awareness or being intentional and having that conversation. So yeah, I love that example about your hiring process. I think that's really interesting and effective. Kai, there's a question for you, and then I'm going to pop up to the one above it in a moment. But what is the biggest obstacle to building DEI into new companies?
Especially for new companies, you actually have an amazing opportunity. It's way harder to build DEI into older companies because you can't rebuild a plane while it's already flying. But if you're starting at the ground up,
I disagree. All right, we have a debate. All right, let's get into this.
one of the things, firstly, not having a mindful and intentional strategy around it. That's a really big thing going in. I think a lot of people assume that it's just going to happen, right? Especially when you're, I really appreciate diversity and inclusion. Like, it's part of my values. It's something I really do. But if you're not really creating a strategy to actually, have metrics, right? Paying attention, understanding what are the systems that you're implementing? What are the outcomes of these systems? And especially for things around, like, say, hiring, retention, performance evaluation. How are you measuring what does performance look like? I think you talked really amazingly about the talent pool, a diverse talent pool of stay-at-home moms that can't traditionally work 9 to 5. Right? If we're expecting success to look like, you're coming in at these hours, you're doing these things, and this is what your scope of work is, you're not recognizing that you're excluding a lot of people. Right? So taking that time to be intentional with how am I actually implementing these systems before you just go off into light speed, because that's that's the startup environment, is everything is going to be happening so fast that you really do have to take that step to reflect. How is this working? Is this working? I should start asking people. I should start getting expertise, right? I should go talk to people that have awareness of perspectives that I don't know. That's another huge part, is don't assume that you know what to do just because you value diversity and inclusion. Just because you have these values doesn't mean you understand the experience of what someone is going through. right? So getting time, talking to experts, for example, I'm doing a research project right now. I'm doing my plug now.
Do it. Go, Kai, go.
This
is an entrepreneurship panel after all, right?
We have to plug, right? Right now I'm helping. So one of the things that I do in organizations is I come in and I teach about gender diversity, right? Because even the questions like pronouns, there's so many. Everyone just assumes that we know, how to use them. We see them, we put them all in our email signatures. But I guarantee most people are just like, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this, but no one's really explained why. Right? And that's kind of the questions that you need to ask and getting someone to come in. So I do this diversity training. One of the research projects that I'm doing now is actually finding ways to make that more effective. And so, by the way, if you're ever looking for that kind of thing, come see me after. I'll plug it even more later. But
KaiSargent.com.
Sorry, just come see me afterwards. But
And also like some self-compassion. I think people are so afraid of making mistakes.
Yes.
We had Finn, they, non-binary, queer, and I always still had to like mentally remind myself the right way to do it because it just takes practice. And they were cool with that. And then eventually I had to stop punishing myself and then it got easier. So
that was kind of the last thing I was going to throw on was one of the most important things in my perspective to creating an inclusive, work environment is that space for mistakes, right? If people don't feel like they can make a mistake, and secondly, if you don't feel like you can tell people, hey, I don't know if that works for me, right? I really want to have a conversation about that. If you feel scared to have that conversation, if the people in your team, they feel scared to talk to each other like that and be real for a moment, you're not going to create an environment where you can build inclusion, right? People need to be able to have that conflict because conflict at the end of the day is what's going to make things grow. It's what's going to make things better, and it's how people are going to create a more cohesive team. So those are some of like the obstacles, especially at a very early stage that you can build right in there.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing.
just very briefly, vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable with your team. Don't expect that you have to be the stoic know-it-all, like you have all the answers. No, I mean, I've cried so many times in front of my team, and that's because they know they know then it's okay for them to not be perfect and to cry and to ask questions and to talk to me, because when you're being vulnerable, you're being very strong, and you're really paving the way for the rest of your company.
I'm going to go to the next question because I think this is one that a lot of people might be asking themselves is, have you experienced a time when you question your values while running your business? Maybe the answer is no. And if that's the case, that's interesting and amazing.
We ask ourselves whether we're making decisions in alignment with our values all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important to understand sometimes it feels like your values are in conflict in certain decision-making moments. So I'll give you a really recent example. We, actually there's a couple of examples I'll give one. We recently all experienced government and schools being closed for National Day of Mourning. And we were asked by staff pretty quickly whether we were going to be closed in observance of that day as well. We have staff members across the country, so certain staff members in certain provinces had to have it off as a staff because that's what their provincial government mandated. But we made the decision as a company that we would not observe that as a statutory holiday because at Pocketed, we believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and decolonization. And for us, that means that we prioritize National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which fell 11 days after that. And so for us to ask our team to take a day off in celebration and commemoration of somebody that led colonization, was the face for so long and had heavy, heavy role to play in slave trade, felt like a very triggering thing to ask of our team. So that was an example where we had to make decisions in alignment with our values, but the conflict there for us is that we also have a lot of parents on our team. And they had no childcare with like 3 days notice. So how do we handle ensuring that our folks on our team have the time they need to be parents and show up for their small children while also staying true to our company values around DEID? And that was a moment for us that we had to put our values into practice. We made the decision not to observe September 19th as a stat, and to also ensure that our team, that our parents knew that they had time, if they needed it, to be flex. as well as supporting folks who may have felt triggered by the headlines and everything that was happening around September 19th. So that's an example where, two values, you want to acknowledge and honor both. And you've got to find ways of doing that as a business owner.
And I think maybe some examples that Kai and Patrice mentioned earlier is being transparent about that, being vulnerable, saying, I'm not sure what the right decision is, but here's how our thinking behind it is one way of maybe helping navigate through those challenges. Kai or Patrice, do you have a thought on that one?
Yeah. So just given that I'm still really early in all of my things, I don't have employees, I don't really have a team yet, I'm just kind of operating on myself. When I think about, questioning the values is when I actually think of the different roles I have. So on one hand, I'm trying to run this consulting practice. I'm subcontracted for a couple of organizations. I'm also a student, so I have commitments to my group classes or basically team projects, just my academic life. I'm also doing this research thing. And also one of the things that brings me the most joy in my life is I perform, right? I'm actually gonna be doing some stand-up comedy a little bit later, right? And so
Don't go away.
and so there's a lot of different places where, and it's not that the values are different, right? Kind of this joy, action, compassion, the values are the same. But when I think about them in conflict with each other, it's where am I placing my time? Where am I placing my energy? And in the beginning, I spent a lot of time working, right? Spending a lot of time, in school and doing a lot of things that were not sustaining me. And that was where I had to realize and take a step back and say, I still have a year worth of school left, right? And as much as I want to get into the world, I took 3 years after high school, so I'm kind of graduating at 25. So I feel a little bit behind, and that was always rushing. I know.
You're not behind.
Well, that's the thing is, you get sucked into that mentality of I need to get it done. I need to do more. I need to do more, and I wasn't taking the time for myself to explore the things that I really loved, like things like stand-up, things like performing more, doing spoken word poetry, just taking some time to do more art, right? Those are the things that I really, really loved, and I wanted to make sure I was setting time aside for that, in addition to the work that I was doing. And so that was an instance where it was a kind of not really a conflict in values, but in a conflict in how those values are manifesting in different roles.
Some of the basic stuff, be kind, be compassionate, don't be an asshole. But also, all this stuff is evolving all the time. As you're learning more, your what you're trying to do with your company and your products or whatever else is always trying to get a little bit better all the time, just trying to do better. And don't feel like, once here's the mandate, this is what we're going to stick to, we're done. No, you're not done. You're just going to have to take in more information and work to try and be better.
Great. I see so many fantastic questions, and I know we don't have time to address them all, but what this makes me think is this is only part one of another ongoing conversation and dialogue that we can have. So we will capture these questions and we'll find ways to, address them going forward. It may not be right now, but maybe before we close, because I know we have our wonderful MCs waiting in the wing, maybe if I can ask all three of you wonderful people for being here and generously sharing your thoughts. Is there one last thought that you would want the audience, want them to sit with around thinking about this big question that we've explored? And if you don't have one, that's okay. But if there's anything that bubbles up, we have a moment to share before we proceed with the rest of the evening.
I would say that it's easy to plan and sit in a state of planning and strategizing. Get started, because you're going to get it wrong, and you're going to learn, and you're going to evolve, and that's okay. And own it when you get it wrong. Learn from that and move forward. Fail forward is what we always say to our team. Failure should be celebrated for what it is, a learning opportunity. So get started. Don't sit in a room and think about values forever. Start applying them. Start operating. Start building what you're building. Ideas are really, really cheap. It's where the rubber meets the road that counts. So get started.
Thank you. Brianna.
I'm just looking at you as if you knew what I was going to say. Last thing I wanted to leave with is it really does not harm you to share your pronouns, but it creates a space for non-binary people, especially within your team, when you're doing it, to just feel a lot better, feeling a lot more included. It just makes it easier for them to do it. And the reason I want to leave off of that is I spent a lot of time early in my own transition of my gender trying to hide the fact that I was trans, and trying not to bring attention to it, and trying to sort of avoid that whole conversation to begin with, because I didn't want to be the only person in the room that kind of comes and sits down and introduces myself with my pronouns while everyone else is just doing their names. But especially over time, thinking about values, that is the community that I represent, right? I was the only non-binary student in Sauder for a long time, and now that's changing. Right? I like to say I'm the kind of the first drop of an oncoming tsunami that you guys are not prepared for. Because the generation under me has completely decided that this whole gender thing is nonsense. And I'm ready for it, right? And I just want to come and help other people get a little bit ready for that. And so that's kind of the last thing that I wanted to represent my community a little bit, and also just for me to kind of live my values, to own that, and own that as my story.
The single most important thing to have success in your business is have community. Have people that you can talk to, not just experts. You need people that are gonna listen to you when everything is going wrong, and they'll go, yeah, me too, and then you'll feel less bad. And you have to have community 100%, and don't give up equity in your companies too soon, okay? You don't wanna sell it when it's not worth anything. You hold on to it, take as much debt as you can, and grants.
And government funding pocketed.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
EDPCX, baby.
She's amazing, by the way. I love your platform. Really great platform.
That's a testimonial, folks.
Exactly. That's amazing. Thank you, three. This has been super fun. And thank you all for being part of the audience. And I know we have important messages from Cheng and Michelle, so over to you. Thank you very much.
Big round of applause. That was spectacular. I was just entertained by all of this and really loved the energy and dynamic between the three of you. I'm more than welcome to hang out here, or you can hang out here. Okay. Brianna's just going to settle in for the afternoon, so am I. All right. Well, this has really been a spectacular day for just day one, and we have another day and a half yet to go. I just wanted to quickly kind of reflect on a couple of things that really stood out for me, and I know that there is a poll that flashed up there a moment ago, and so it'll flash up again soon, asking you what some of the highlights were for you today, what impact means for you. And I think that one of the sort of a couple of the consistent themes that ran throughout the day, which really is around the tenets of this whole conference, as you will, which is around, action, impact, and experience. And we had a number of our, speakers today really share some compelling stories of just like jumping in and doing it. It's gonna be super hard, it's gonna be super messy. You may get kicked out of a bunch of Facebook groups, but that's okay. That's okay, because you have to start somewhere. And you're gonna make mistakes, and having that, we're gonna talk a little bit about this more in some of our sessions tomorrow, but creating a culture of risk and failure, that's okay, that's something that we embrace. And I think that all of our speakers today, touched on some different examples of that. Early this morning when Brad Liskey joined us around, kind of building a movement, and one of the things that stuck out for me was just sort of this reconciliation between sort of like the marketing and the responsibility. And of course, as a marketer, I really, I wasn't gonna say I was taking that personally, but I was really like, what exactly do you mean? But it does go back to this sort of navigating this tightrope, if you will, of your values, and then kind of satisfying, the stakeholders and those that are that are investing into your success. All this is to say that I don't think it is an easy journey for anybody, but I will say that every single one of the people that joined us on stage today are fabulous examples of people that were driven by impact, created incredible experiences, whether they were successes or failures, but are always very action-oriented and are continuing along this journey. So I think that for me, one of the big takeaways today is it's not always gonna be perfect. And you kind of have to be willing to sort of lean in and fail forward. And I'm sure that you all have different things that you've reflected upon throughout the course of today. And so we'd love for you to share some of those things that which you have, which is wonderful. So I'm actually going to turn over to Chang for a moment because you also may have some takeaways that you want to share with the audience.
Thanks, Michelle. What a fantastic way to close off the early part of day one. I can't believe day one is almost done already. We do have an evening session with more from Kai, as well as our own Tom Urban and MJ Arrojo. So stick around and come upstairs for some drinks and some entertainment. We've heard from a very diverse group, both just now and throughout our day. Some of the takeaways that I've taken away myself personally include impact doesn't require giving up on the financial success. Success doesn't require giving up on impact. And now we've heard that we can share not just our journeys on the road to success and impact, but also we can include values on that road. So as we are immersed in all things entrepreneurship throughout this week, we hope you will join us this evening and throughout the rest of the week.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So yes, thanks everyone for coming out today. If you would like to join us upstairs in the UBC space, our wonderful collaborators, Macmillan, are supporting our evening this evening. As noted, Kai is going to, it has a performance lined up for you, and we also have a musical performance. So something a little different, some different ways of actually sharing it. No, you're not the musician. You're the We have other musicians that are upstairs. But in any event, so more things happening later on today. And other than that, we'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Have a great night.